David Morris. I've been working with Naturetrek as a tour leader for about 15 years, I think, this year, somewhere of that order. And my day-to-day job, I work for the RSPB as our operations manager for Cumbria in North East England. Yeah, tonight's tour is mostly going to feature around the Estonia in Spring tour, which I've been doing for about 8 years now, working alongside my Estonian counterpart, Matti Koos. I think Estonia is an absolutely fantastic country and probably shares a lot of commonality with many of the other Baltic states that we'll be hearing about tonight. But for me, the first time I went there was utterly blown away by the kind of wildlife, the people, the landscape, the culture, the habitats. And it really, if I want to sum Estonia up, it's kind of like Eastern Europe meets Northern Europe in terms of the sort of birdic avifauna and some habitats that are present there. Bit of geography for those that are not too familiar where Estonia is. It's the most northerly of the Baltic states. Right up at the top end of the Baltic against the Finnish Gulf, just south of Finland, north of Latvia, and just slightly to the west of Russia. It's probably one of Europe's most underpopulated countries, and probably certainly one of the most kind of underdeveloped in terms of the habitat. But that doesn't by any means mean the country isn't underdeveloped. It's a very modern, pleasant country, fantastic people, fantastic cuisine, standard of living. It's a really great place to go and enjoy a holiday looking at nature. The trip that we do is a 3-stop trip. We fly into Tallinn in the north, the capital city, and then using minibuses to get around that Matti and I drive, we move over into Western Estonia first in 2 parts. We spend the first part of our trip up in the northwest of the country, up above Matsalu Nature Reserve, staying just outside a little village there, Ruslepa. And then we move further south down past Pärnu into staying at a nice place just outside of a village called Hadamist on the coast there, before then moving east towards Most, where we stay over towards the Russian border to explore the sort of different landscape and species in the east of the country. So flying to Tallinn, as I say, rather delightful modern city, very colourful. Pick up our minibuses, meet the group, and then off we go into the Estonian countryside. At that time of spring, it's a really great place because you've got this kind of changeover, I think, that's sort of set out there, where you've got this mix of wintering birds and some of the spring migrants and some of the summer breeders all colliding at that same time in around mid-May. I think one of the first things that really overwhelms you as you're driving west through the Estonian countryside en route to our first hotel is just the quantity of things like geese, particularly kind of barnacle geese, bean geese in particular, out feeding across the Estonian countryside. We arrive at our first stop, which is a really nice selection of kind of wooden log cabins in amongst the kind of native pine forests there. Familiarise ourselves with some of the kind of wildlife there, which are not too dissimilar to anyone in Britain, but often encountering things like red squirrels, crested tits, some waxwings moving about, and sometimes sort of displaying in there amongst the pine woods. And then for those that want to just stretch through the dunes behind the pine woods onto some really nice beaches along the kind of Baltic Sea coast there, where that time of year kind of migrants like kind of wind chats, stone chats, swallows, martins, things like that are starting to move their way through the country on the way up into the Baltic. So get to bed, having enjoyed a nice meal, ready for a reasonably early start to go out into the woodlands at dawn to try and find some of the specialities of that part of Western Estonia. The woodlands there really fantastically diverse, all well managed, productive woodland, as well as some kind of really nice ancient, kind of fairly more extensively managed woodland. And really, some of the woodpeckers are some of the kind of star treats of the show that many people go on the trip to see. So generally have a good week, seeing plenty of these. So things like top left, we've got Syrian woodpecker, middle spots, we get great spots, lesser spotted. There's a missile-like black woodpecker skirting through the image there, as well as kind of woodpecker relatives like wryneck, which are just found all around where we stay. After a morning's treat of woodpeckers and a nice warming breakfast out in the field, it's off for some sea watching. And this is the Pusapesa Peninsula. This sticks out into the Baltic and gives you a kind of nearly 360-degree panoramic view of migration at that time of year. It's one of the best sea watching experiences I've ever had in my life. Absolutely fantastic at that time of year, with a kind of range of kind of ducks, geese, auks, divers, birds of prey, all starting to move through. So some of the species there, big numbers of geese, beans and barnacles particularly pushing through, Buicks and hooper swans, some still knocking about kind of in wintering populations, good populations of things like black-throated diver, lots of sea duck, huge numbers if the conditions are right, of things like long-tailed duck and eiders, often flying over your head, giving amazing views, and kind of velvet scoter there, bottom left. And then birds of prey kicking about as well. So things like horny buzzards, Montague's harriers, hobbies, all those sort of things starting to stream through as the spring starts opening. And yeah, get some incredible views. All the photos, incidentally, in this slideshow are taken on that trip. So any photographers in the group get amazing photographic opportunities with very little effort or need to be in a hide. We then move out from sea watching to sort of explore the middle of the day into the landscape. That time of year, cranes are returning back to their breeding grounds. So you've got birds bugling away in the edges of forests and bogs, here with a bit of a light snowfall at that time of the year. And then some of the mammals of the country. So Estonia also has a really good mammal flora, and particularly some of those kind of large predatory mammals. So things like kind of wolf, brown bear, European lynx, some of the highest densities of any other European country. Things like elk there on the left, commonly encountered on the trip. And then on the right there, we've got a wolf footprint. Don't usually see wolf, but very often encounter recent tracks and signs like footprints and droppings. And it's just a case of being in the right place at the right time. And hopefully, if you're on a trip, we bump into them. Then move down in towards the sort of local town to check out the local municipal ponds and park. And at that time of year, you've got Slavonian grebes starting to display and nest build on many of the town parks in that area, giving amazing views. And often the group there looking at these birds as kind of the locals are coming around fascinated what we're looking at. But the beauty of these birds is remarkable, and just totally not bothered by people walking past or looking at them, totally habituated to people. We then moved down to explore some of the bigger wetlands within that area, and particularly down into Matsalu Bay. This is a huge nature reserve and kind of complex of really extensively managed wetlands, Baltic meadows, and one of the largest reed beds in Europe within Matsalu Bay. This is a fantastic viewpoint from the viewing tower at Heska, somewhere where we stay. And visit, have lunch or an evening meal barbecue there to enjoy a really good afternoon's birding. Quick plodge into some of those reed beds around there, and we've got things like redneck grebes courting and nest building, blue throats clicking from the reeds as we go through the boardwalks that intersect into these wetlands as spring's really starting to unfold. Now this is Heska. This is a lovely traditional Estonian thatched property, which does guest accommodation and also provides us with some really nice meals out in the field. And the tower hide there that you can see in the background sets the record for the most species seen in 24 hours at any point in Europe. So really fantastic panoramic viewpoint where you've got vast quantities of wildfowl waders and a range of other species that can easily be seen from that place. That time of year, big flocks of ruff starting to come back through, the kind of colourful males busy displaying about. Really good place to see them at Heska. Also birds starting to set up territory in some of those wet Baltic meadows. Geese are plenty. These are greater white fronts, often with the lesser number of lesser white fronts in there, bean geese, as I say, mostly barnacles at that time of year, and often with the odd red-breasted goose thrown in for good measure. And usually what's keeping them up in the air is good quantities of white-tailed eagles that are doing really well in the country, and particularly feeding on some of the kind of wildfowl and stuff around that Baltic coast, and give brilliant views. I mean, incredible numbers. Some days up at that viewing tower at Heiske, you're sat there and you can see kind of 10 whitetails at any one point, just keeping the kind of cranes and the wildfowl and the waders up in the air. Back to the hotel to enjoy one of many fantastic sunsets over the Baltic coast before going back out to look for some of the kind of more crepuscular goodies in the woods behind where we stay. Good range of owls that we encounter, greatly assisted by Matti, who leads the tour with me, who's a local Estonian and a bird conservationist out in Estonia. And he, earlier on in the spring, is doing various bird surveys in the woods around there and really helping to pin down territories of these birds, including species like pygmy owl here. This, by the way, was an absolute chance encounter we had with a bird that came out really early on in the evening in full light, and again was totally not fazed by us next to the road where we were watching in a forestry track, and then again came back the following morning and that bird was still thereabouts. Our second stop for the trip, as I say, we're moving further south down the Baltic coast towards the Latvian border, and staying just outside Matti's home village, actually, of Hadamist. This is a ex-Soviet astronaut sort of holiday resort that we stay on the coast there, just above the famous Kabli Bird Observatory. That's the kind of main dining area and lounge area at the thing. And again, each of us has a nice little sort of lodge tucked into the pines with views over a number of kind of lagoons and scrapes and the Baltic Sea coast in front. So absolutely fantastic birding from your bed if you want, but great birding from breakfast and at all times from the accommodation there. And that's the sort of habitat that surrounds us. This is Pickler pools. This is a range of Baltic meadows where we get things like Baltic dunlin displaying and breeding there in the spring. Some really nice reed bed complexes. And there's also a group of ex kind of fish farm that's been modified into a reed bed complex now that's managed specifically for nature conservation, giving a really exciting dynamic reed bed system full of kind of bitterns, crakes, rails, and a range of other exciting species just behind the Baltic coast seawall. Other gems of those meadows at that time of year in the kind of Pärnu district. So citrine wagtails, plenty of citrine wagtails to fill your boots with. And again, we visit a site where they're kind of feeding around your feet and around the path. So some incredible views of this really stunning wagtail species. Species like penduline tits, knocking about aplenty, often find their sort of pendulous nests in amongst some of the willows. And it's not just about the birds, some really great butterflies as well, and a range of early odonata that we also find, things like checkered skipper species, good northern species on the bogs, things like cranberry fritillary, some of those kind of harder to find sort of northern species like fiery coppers. And talking of the bogs, there are some absolutely pristine bog environments that we go and visit in Estonia. This is Nigula Bog. Brilliant as a kind of bog conservationist myself to see what these intact bog systems look like. And here the birding can be really good, where we've got things like wood sandpiper, curlew, whimbrel breeding out here, golden eagle nesting in some of these pines. Yeah, really exciting range of species. And then some of the woodland grouse as those bogs transition into the kind of native pine woods. The old adage of do bears poo in the woods is not true, because here out on the boardwalk, bears also poo on the bog. So yeah, really interesting to see some of those large mammal signs as well. Keeps you on your toes and gets you excited for what you might find around the corner. And one of the much sought after species on the trip is capercaillie, large woodland grouse that we visit a number of kind of areas that are really good for cappers and lek sites, and kind of observe those birds from a distance to avoid disturbance. But probably every other trip that I've done, we've encountered a rogue male, and this is my colleague Matty, who leads the trip with me. We had a rogue male that at one point wouldn't let the minibus down the road. We all got out from a safe distance to kind of look at this majestic male. All the group then hid behind me and Matty, and as it came for us, but gave some incredible views for the group, including this photo that I took of that same male. Some really nice wood meadows, a habitat that's really underrepresented in the UK, but some really good examples here in Estonia. And these are kind of wooded areas that have been managed over the decades to produce hay. So really floristic, really good for butterflies, but really fantastic for birds. And this is one particular place that we'll visit that's thriving in kind of a range of species. Average year, we get some really nice weather, kind of a good warm spring day in the UK, kind of getting up to 18 degrees sometimes at that time of year. Short sleeves, and the beauty is it's well before the mosquitoes and midges come out. Yeah, what a difference a year can make. This was another year at that same time when we had a snow flurry. So yeah, pack for all those eventualities. But whatever happens, we'll do a good Naturetrek picnic, and usually includes plenty of hot food and drink as well at that time of year on our picnics. And yes, you can get lucky. That's that same picnic site where one of us walked towards a tree, probably to go and find the use of it behind it, and out popped Yorulal. Again, it's a bird we often see in the evenings, but brilliant to encounter this species in the daytime. Species like nutcracker are also common within the woods there. And as I say, a range of really interesting plants as well for the sort of more general naturalist, species like twin flower, hepatica. We've got pulsatilla, spring, snow anemone, and things like military orchid in a good year. We then move a bit further east to our final stop. This is over towards the Russian border in a converted vodka distillery. We're greeted when we arrive with shots of vodka, and a really nice end with some really nice plush accommodation here in this fantastic building, with some really tastefully restored, with a range of nice bedrooms and great food here, but location as well. So you can see the bottom right there. I mean, this fantastic tarn, absolutely hooching with bird life straight outside of the room. Hawfinches feeding often on the lawn around there. The rose finches, as they start coming in, firing up, saying they're pleased to meet us. Really brilliant place as a base for birding. One of the main reasons we skip over to eastern Estonia is to go and look at some of the meadows over there, and we'll do at least one evening looking at a great snipe lek in one of the meadows out in that area. Unfortunately, I haven't got any photos of great snipe lekking. Certainly, my dust capabilities of my camera are not that good, but we do get some really good views where you can kind of observe them jumping about and hearing them calling. So yeah, certainly one of the best great snipe lekking experiences I've had in Europe on this trip. Always bumping into black grouse everywhere, although I must admit this is the first time I've seen black grouse in a field full of onions, and this is just testament to the kind of really extensively managed countryside out in Estonia, semi-natural habitats bumping into really quite extensively managed farmland where many of these species are really doing well. But also out in the east of Estonia is also some really good woodland and the start of the sort of boreal tiger forest as well, which is where we get some of the other woodland specialists that we don't see in the west so much. This is one of those sort of woodlands that we go in, some really fantastic trails to explore. As you can see, the wood anemones, the spring flowers are coming through and the birds are starting to come out. We're obviously concerned in the UK about the decline of species like wood warbler top left. I mean, the woodlands in this area are absolutely hooching full of wood warblers and that sort of spinning coin display that we hear. We've also got stuff like greenish warbler top right, and then some of the other specialists that we go in there, things like red-breasted flycatcher, you can see down the bottom right. And again, all the woodpeckers really well represented there. And again, if you're lucky, bump into a Ural owl. And this was a nest site we just happened to chance upon in a collapsed old birch top with the female sat there. Now, Ural owl do have a tendency to be a bit narky near the nest, so definitely one to keep a distance from, but really observe. And we've actually been back towards that nest site, and that bird has returned for the last 3 years I've been doing this trip, and she sits there patiently, and we can observe from a distance away, even in the daytime, to get really good views of that bird. So overall, I definitely recommend Estonia as a top birding destination for anyone with a real desire to see a great mix of sort of spring passage and the end of winter birding, with some great food and some great people in a really nice country. That's it for me.